Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes, and we continue one more time for The Three Musketeers, Chapter 42. The title of this chapter is The Anjou Wine. After the most disheartening news of the king's health, a report of his convalescence began to prevail in the camp, and he was very anxious to be in person at the siege. It was said that as soon as he could mount a horse, he would set forth. Meantime, Monsieur, who knew that from one day to the other he might expect to be removed from his command by the Duc d'Angoulême, by Baumsolière, or Schomberg, who were all eager for his post, did but little, lost his days in wavering, and did not dare to attempt any great enterprise to drive the English from the Isle of Ré, where they had still besieged the citadel of Saint Martin and the fort of La Prée, as on their side the French were besieging La Rochelle. D'Artagnan, as we have said, had become more tranquil, as always happens after a past danger, particularly when danger seems to have vanished. He only felt one uneasiness, and that was not at the hearing of any tidings from his friends. But one morning, at the commencement of the month of November, everything was explained to him by this letter, dated from Villeroy. Monsieur d'Artagnan and Messieurs Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, after having had an entertainment at my house and enjoying themselves very much, created such a disturbance that the provost of the castle, a rigid man, has ordered them to be confined for some days, but I accomplished the order they have given me by forwarding to you a dozen bottles of my Anjou wine, with which they are much pleased. They are desirous that you should drink to their health in their favorite wine. I have done this, and am, Monsieur, with great respect, your very humble and obedient servant, Gaudot, purveyor of the Musketeers. "That's all well," cried D'Artagnan. "They think of me in their pleasures, as I thought of them in my troubles. Well, I will certainly drink to their health with all my heart, but I will not drink alone." And D'Artagnan went among those guardsmen with whom he had formed greater intimacy than with the others, to invite them to enjoy with him this present of delicious Anjou wine which had been sent him from Villeroy. One of the two guardsmen was engaged that evening, and another the next, so meeting was fixed for the day after that. D'Artagnan, on his return, sent the 12 bottles of wine to the refreshment room of the guards, with strict orders that great care should be taken of it, and then, on the day appointed, as the dinner was fixed for midday, D'Artagnan sent Planchet at 9 in the morning to assist in preparing everything for the entertainment. Planchet, very proud of being raised to the dignity of landlord, thought he would make all ready, like an intelligent man, and with this view called in the assistance of the lackey of one of his master's guests, named Fourreau, and the false soldier who had tried to kill D'Artagnan, and who, belonging to no corps, had entered into the service of D'Artagnan, or rather Planchet, after D'Artagnan had saved his life. The hour of the banquet being come, the two guardsmen arrived, took their places, and the dishes were arranged on the table. Planchet waited, towel on arm. Fourreau uncorked the bottles, and Brismont, which was the name of the convalescent, poured the wine, which was a little shaken by its journey, carefully into decanters. Of this wine, the first bottle being a little thick at the bottom, Brismont poured less into a glass, and D'Artagnan desired him to drink it, for the poor devil had not yet recovered his strength. The guests, having eaten the soup, were about to lift the first glass of wine to their lips, when all at once the cannon sounded from Fort Louis and Fort Neuf. The guardsmen, imagining this to be caused by some unexpected attack, either of the besieged or the English, sprang to their swords. D'Artagnan, not less forward than they, did likewise, and they all ran out in order to repair to their posts. But scarcely were they out of their room before they were made aware of the cause of this noise. Cries of "Live the king! Live the cardinal!" resounded on every side, and the drums were beaten in all directions. In short, the king, impatient as he has been said to be, had come by forced marches, and had that moment arrived with all his household and a reinforcement of 10,000 troops. His musketeers preceded and followed him. D'Artagnan, placed in line with his company, saluted with an expressive gesture his three friends, whose eyes soon discovered him, and Monsieur de Tréville, who detected him at once. The ceremony of reception over, the four friends were soon in one another's arms. "Pardieu!" cried D'Artagnan, "you could not have arrived at a better time. The dinner cannot have had time to get cold yet." "Can it, gentlemen?" added the young man, turning to the two guardsmen, whom he introduced to his friends. "Ah, ah!" said Porthos, "it appears we are feasting." "I hope," said Aramis, "there are no women at your dinner." "Is there any drinkable wine in your tavern?" asked Athos. "Well, pardieu, there is yours, my dear friend," replied D'Artagnan. "Our wine!" said Athos, astonished. "Yes, that you sent me. We sent you wine? You know very well, the wine from the hills of Anjou." "Yes, I know what brand you are talking about, the wine you prefer." "Well, in the absence of champagne and chambertin, you must content yourselves with that. And so, connoisseurs in wine as we are, we have sent you some Anjou wine," said Porthos. "Not exactly. It is the wine that was sent by your order." "On our account?" said the three Musketeers. "Did you send this wine, Aramis?" said Athos. "No. And you, Porthos?" "No. And you, Athos?" "No." "If it was not you, it was your purveyor," said D'Artagnan. "Our purveyor?" "Yes, your purveyor, Godeau, the purveyor of the Musketeers." "My faith, never mind where it comes from," said Porthos. "Let us taste it, and if it is good, let us drink it." "No," said Athos. "Don't let us drink wine which comes from an unknown source." "You are right, Athos," said D'Artagnan. "Did none of you charge your purveyor, Godeau, to send me some wine?" "No, and yet you say he has sent you some from us." "Here is the letter," said D'Artagnan, and he presented the note to his comrades. "This is not his writing," said Athos. "I am acquainted with it. Before we left Villeroy, I settled the accounts of the regiment." "A false letter altogether," said Porthos. "We have not been disciplined." "D'Artagnan," said Aramis, in a reciprocal tone, "how could you believe that we had made a disturbance?" D'Artagnan grew pale, and a convulsive trembling shook his limbs. "Thou alarmest me," said Athos, who never used thee and thou, but upon very particular occasions. "What has happened?" "Look you, my friends," cried D'Artagnan, "a horrible suspicion crosses my mind. Can this be another vengeance of that woman?" It was now Athos who turned pale. D'Artagnan rushed towards the refreshment room, and the three Musketeers and the two guards following him. The first object that met the eyes of D'Artagnan on entering the room was Brisemont, stretched upon the ground and rolling in horrible convulsions. Planchet and Fourreau, as pale as death, were trying to give him succor. But it was plain that all assistance was useless. All the features of the dying man were distorted with agony. "Ah!" cried he, on perceiving D'Artagnan. "Ah! This is frightful. You pretend to pardon me, and you poison me." "I?" cried D'Artagnan. "I, wretch! What do you say?" "I say that it was you who gave me the wine. I say that it was you who desired me to drink it. I say you wished to avenge yourself on me, and I say that it is horrible." "Do not think so, Brisemont," said D'Artagnan. "Do not think so. I swear to you, I protest." "Oh, but God is above. God will punish you, my God. Grant me that he may one day suffer what I suffer." "Upon the gospel," said D'Artagnan, throwing himself down by the dying man, "I swear to you that the wine was poisoned and that I was going to drink of it as you did." "I do not believe you," cried the soldier, and he expired amid horrible tortures. Frightful, frightful, murmured Athos, while Porthos broke the bottles and Aramis gave orders, a little too late, that a confessor should be sent for. "Oh, friends! Oh, my friends!" said D'Artagnan. "You come once more to save my life. Not only mine, but those of these gentlemen. Gentlemen," continued he, addressing the guardsmen, "I request you be silent with regard to this adventure. Great personages may have had a hand in what you have seen, and if talked about, the evil would only recoil upon us." "Ah, monsieur," stammered Planchet, more dead than alive. "Ah, monsieur, what an escape I have had." "How, sirrah? You were going to drink my wine." "To the health of the king, monsieur. I was going to drink a small glass of it if Fourreau had not told me, as I was called." "Alas," said Fourreau, whose teeth chattered with terror, "I wanted to get him out of the way that I might drink myself." "Gentlemen," said D'Artagnan, addressing the guardsmen, "you may easily comprehend that such a feast can only be very dull after what has taken place. So accept my excuses, and put off the party till another day, I beg of you." The two guardsmen courteously accepted D'Artagnan's excuses, and perceiving that the four friends desired to be alone, retired. When the young guardsman and the three Musketeers were without witnesses, they looked at one another with an air which plainly expressed that each of them perceived the gravity of their situation. "In the first place," said Athos, "let us leave this chamber. And dead are not agreeable company, particularly when they have died a violent death." "Planchet," said D'Artagnan, "I commit the corpse of this poor devil to your care. Let him be interred in holy ground." He committed a crime, it is true, but he repented of it, and the four friends quit the room, leaving to Planchet and Fourreau the duty of paying mortuary honors to Brismont. The host gave them another chamber, and served them with fresh eggs and some water, which Athos went himself to draw at the fountain. In a few words, Porthos and Aramis were posted as to the situation. "Well," said D'Artagnan to Athos, "you see, my dear friend, this is what war is to death." Athos shook his head. "Yes, yes," replied he, "I perceive that plainly. But do you really believe it is she?" "I am sure of it. Nevertheless, I confess I still doubt. But the fleur-de-lis on her shoulder?" "She is some Englishwoman who has committed a crime in France, and she has been branded in consequence." "Athos, she is your wife, I tell you," repeated D'Artagnan. "Only reflect how much the two descriptions resemble each other." "Yes, but I should think the other must be dead. I hanged her so effectually." It was D'Artagnan who now shook his head in his turn. "But in either case, what is to be done?" said the young man. "The fact is, one cannot remain thus, with a sword hanging eternally over his head," said Athos. "We must extricate ourselves from this position." "But how?" "Listen, you must try to see her, and have an explanation with her. Say to her, 'Peace or war,' my word as a gentleman never to say anything of you, never to do anything against you on your side, a solemn oath to remain neutral with respect to me. If not, I will apply to the chancellor, I will apply to the king, I will apply to the hangman, I will move the courts against you, I will denounce you as branded, I will bring you to trial, and if you are acquitted, well, by the faith of a gentleman, I will kill you at the corner of some wall, as I would a mad dog." "I like the means well enough," said D'Artagnan, "but where and how to meet her?" "Time, dear friend, time brings round opportunity. Opportunity is the martingale of man. The more we have ventured, the more we gain, when we know how to wait." "Yes, but to wait surrounded by assassins and poisoners?" "Bah!" said Athos. "God has preserved us hitherto. God will preserve us still. Yes, besides, we are men, and everything considered, it is our lot to risk our lives. But she?" asked he, in an undertone. "What she?" asked Athos. "Constance. Madame Bonchenot." "Ah, that's true," said Athos. "My poor friend, I had forgotten you were in love." "Well, but," said Aramis, "have you not learned By the letter you found on the wretched corpse that she is in a convent? One may be very comfortable in a convent, and as soon as the siege of La Rochelle is terminated, I promise you, on my part. Good, cried Athos. Good. Yes, my dear Aramis, we all know that your views have a religious tendency. I am only temporarily a musketeer, said Aramis humbly. It is some time since we heard from his mistress, said Athos, in a low voice. But take no notice. We know all about that. Well, said Porthos, it appears to me that the means are very simple. What? Asked D'Artagnan. You say she is in a convent, replied Porthos. Yes, very well. As soon as the siege is over, we'll carry her off from the convent, but we must first learn what convent she is in. That's true, said Porthos, but I think I have it, said Athos. Don't you say, dear D'Artagnan, that is the queen who has made choice of the convent for her? I believe so, at least. In that case, Porthos will assist us. And how so, if you please? Why, by your marchioness, your duchess, your princess. She must have a long arm. Hush, said Porthos, placing a finger on his lips. I believe her to be a cardinalist. She must know nothing of the matter. Then, said Aramis, I take upon myself to obtain intelligence of her. You, Aramis? Cried the three friends. You? And how? By the queen's almoner, to whom I am intimately allied, said Aramis, coloring. And on this assurance the four friends, who had finished their modest repast, separated with the promise of meeting again that evening. D'Artagnan returned to less important affairs, and the three musketeers repaired to the king's quarters, where they had to be prepared, or had to prepare their lodgings. Chapter 43. The Sign of the Red Dovecot. Meanwhile, the king, with more reason than the cardinal, showed his hatred for Buckingham, although scarcely arrived, was in such a haste to meet the enemy that he commanded every disposition to be made to drive the English from the Isle of Ré and afterward to press the siege of La Rochelle. But notwithstanding his earnest wish, he was delayed by the dissensions which broke out between Messieurs Bassompierre and Schomberg against the Duc Angoulême. Messieurs Bassompierre and Schomberg were marshals of France, and claimed their right of commanding the army under the orders of the king. But the cardinal, who feared that Bassompierre, a Huguenot at heart, might press but feebly the English and Rochellais, his brothers in religion, supported the Duc d'Angoulême, whom the king, at his instigation, had named lieutenant general. The result was that, to prevent Messieurs Bassompierre and Schomberg from deserting the army, a separate command had to be given to each. Bassompierre took his quarters on the north of the city, between Leu and Dampierre. The Duc d'Angoulême on the east, from Dampierre to Pergeny, and Monsieur de Schomberg on the south, from Pergeny to Anguitine. The quarters of Monsieur were at Dampierre. The quarters of the king were sometimes at Estry, sometimes at Jarry. The cardinal's quarters were upon the downs, at the bridge of La Pierre, in a simple house without any entrenchment. So the monsieur watched Bassompierre, the king, the Duc d'Angoulême, and the cardinal, Monsieur de Schomberg. As soon as the organization was established, they set about driving the English from the Isle. The juncture was favorable. The English, who require, above everything, good living in order to be good soldiers, only eating salt meat and bad biscuit, had many invalids in their camp. Still further, the sea, very rough at this period of the year, all along the seacoast, destroyed every day some little vessel, and the shore, from the point of La Anguillon to the trenches, was at every tide literally covered with wrecks of pinnacles, robbers, and feluccas. The result that even if the king's troops remained quietly in their camp, it was evident that some day or other Buckingham, who only continued in the Isle from obstinacy, would be obliged to raise the siege. But as Monsieur de Torias gave information that everything was preparing in the enemy's camp for a fresh assault, the king judged that it would be best to put an end to the affair, and gave the necessary orders for decisive action. As it is not our intention to give a journal of the siege, but on the contrary only to describe such of the events of it as are concerned with the story we are relating, we will content ourselves with saying in 2 words that the expedition succeeded, to the great astonishment of the king and the great glory of the cardinal. The English, repulsed foot by foot, beaten in all encounters, and defeated in the passage of the Isle of Leu, were obliged to re-embark, leaving the field of battle 2,000 men, among whom were 5 colonels, 3 lieutenant colonels, 250 captains, 20 gentlemen of rank, 4 pieces of cannon, and 60 flags, which were taken to Paris by Claude de Saint-Simon, and suspended with great pomp in the arches of Notre Dame. Te Deums were chanted in camp, and afterwards throughout France. The cardinal was left free to carry on the siege without having, at least at present, anything to fear on the part of the English. But it must be acknowledged, this response was but momentary. An envoy of the Duke of Buckingham, named Montague, had taken, and proof was obtained, of a league between German Empire, Spain, England, and Lorraine. This league was directed against France. Still further, in Buckingham's lodging, which he had been forced to abandon more precipitously than he had expected, papers were found which confirmed this alliance, and which, as the cardinal asserts in his memoirs, strongly compromised Madame de Chevreuse, and consequently the queen. It was upon the cardinal that all the responsibility fell, for one is not a despotic minister without responsibility. All, therefore, of the vast resources of his genius were at work night and day, engaged in listening to the least report heard in any of the great kingdoms of Europe. The cardinal was acquainted with the activity, and more particularly the hatred of Buckingham. In the league which threatened France triumphed, all his influence would be lost. Spanish policy and Austrian policy would have their representatives in the cabinet of the Louvre, where they had as yet but partisans, and he, Richelieu, the French minister, the national minister, would be ruined. The king, even while obeying him like a child, hated him as a child hates his master, and would abandon him to the personal vengeance of Monsieur and the Queen. He would then be lost, and France perhaps with him. All this must be prepared against. Courtiers, becoming every instant more numerous, succeeded one another day and night in the little house of the bridge of La Pierre, in which the cardinal had established his residence. There were monks who wore the frock with such an ill grace that it was easy to perceive they belonged to the church of Militant, women a little inconvenienced by their costume as pages, and whose large trousers could not entirely conceal their rounded forms, and peasants with blackened hats, but with fine limbs, savoring of the man of quality a league off. There were also less agreeable visits, for 2 or 3 times reports were spread that the cardinal had nearly been assassinated. It is true that the enemies of the cardinal said that it was he himself who set these bungling assassins to work, in order to have, if wanted, the right of using reprisals. But we must not believe everything ministers say, nor everything their enemies say. These attempts did not prevail the cardinal, to whom his most inveterate detractors have never denied personal bravery, from making nocturnal excursions, sometimes to communicate to the Duc d'Angoulême important orders, sometimes to confer with the king, and sometimes to have an interview with a messenger whom he did not wish to see at home. On their part, the Musketeers, who had not much to do with the siege, were not under very strict orders and led a joyous life. This was the more easy of the three companions in particular, for being friends of Monsieur de Treville, they obtained from him special permission to be absent after the closing of the camp. Now, one evening when D'Artagnan, who was in the trenches, was not able to accompany them, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, mounted on their battle steeds, enveloped in their war cloaks, with their hands upon their butts, were returning from a drinking place called the Red Dovecot, which Athos had discovered 2 days before upon the Route de Jarry, following the road which led to the camp and quite on their guard, as we have stated, for fear of an ambuscade. When about a quarter of a league from the village of Bosseneux, they fancied they had heard the sound of horses approaching them. They immediately, all three halted, closed in, and waited, occupying the middle of the road. In an instant, and as the moon broke from behind the cloud, they saw a turning of the road 2 horsemen, who, on perceiving them, stopped in their turn, appearing to deliberate whether they should continue in their route or go back. The hesitation created some suspicion in the three friends, and Athos, advancing a few paces in front of the others, cried in a firm voice, "Who goes there?" "Who goes there? Yourselves," replied the horsemen. "That is not an answer," replied Athos. "Who goes there? Answer, or we charge." "Beware of what you are about, gentlemen," said a clear voice which seemed accustomed to command. "It is some superior officer making his night rounds," said Athos. "What do you wish, gentlemen?" "Who are you?" said the same voice, in the same commanding tone. "Answer in your turn, or you may repent of your disobedience." "King's Musketeers," said Athos, more and more convinced that he who interrogated them had the right to do so. "What company?" "Company of Treville." "Advance and give an account of what you are doing here at this hour." The three companions advanced rather humbly, for all were now convinced that they had to do with some more powerful than themselves, leaving Athos the post of speaker. One of the two riders, he had spoken second, 10 paces in front of his companion. Athos made a sign to Porthos and Aramis also to remain in the rear, and advanced alone. "Your pardon, my officer," said Athos, "but we are ignorant with whom we had to do, and you may see that we were keeping good guard." "Your name?" said the officer, who covered a part of his face with his cloak. "But yourself, monsieur," said Athos, who began to be annoyed by this inquisition. "Give me, I beg you, the proof that you have the right to question me." "Your name," repeated the cavalier a second time, letting his cloak fall and leaving his face uncovered. "Monsieur Cardinal!" cried the stupefied musketeer. "Your name!" cried the Eminence, for the third time. "Athos," said the musketeer. The cardinal made a sign to his attendant, who drew near. "These three musketeers shall follow us," said he, in an undertone. "I am not willing it should be known I have left the camp, and if they follow us, we shall be certain they will tell nobody." "We are gentlemen, monseigneur," said Athos. "Require our parole and give yourself no uneasiness. Thank God, we can keep a secret." The cardinal fixed his piercing eyes on the courageous speaker. "You have a quick ear, Monsieur Athos," said the cardinal. "But now listen to this. It is not from mistrust that I request you follow me, but for my security. Your companions are no doubt Messieurs Porthos and Aramis." "Yes, your Eminence," said Athos, while the two musketeers who had remained behind advanced hat in hand. "I know you, gentlemen," said the cardinal. "I know you. I know you are not quite my friends, and I am sorry you are not so. But I know you are brave and loyal gentlemen, and that confidence may be placed in you. Monsieur Athos, do me then the honor to accompany me, you and your two friends, and then I shall have an escort to excite envy in his majesty if we should meet him." The three musketeers bowed to the necks of their horses. "Well, upon my honor," said Athos, "your Eminence is right in taking us with you. We have seen several ill-looking faces on the road, and we have even had a quarrel at the Red Dovecot with 4 of those faces." "A quarrel? And what for, gentlemen?" said the cardinal. "You know, I don't like quarrelers, and that is the reason why I have the honor to inform your eminence of what has happened, for you might learn from it, as others, and upon a false account believe us to be in fault. What have been the results of your quarrel? Said the cardinal, knitting his brow. My friend Aramis here has received a slight sword wound in the arm, but not enough to prevent him, as your eminence may see, from mounting to the assault tomorrow, if your eminence orders an escalade. But you are not the men to allow sword wounds to be inflicted upon you thus, said the cardinal. Come, be frank, gentlemen. You have settled accounts with somebody. Confess. You know I have the right of giving absolution. Aye, monseigneur, said Athos. I did not even draw my sword, but I took him who offended me round the body, and threw him out the window. It appears that in falling, continued Athos, with some hesitation, he broke his thigh. Ah, said the cardinal. And you, Monsieur Porthos? I, monseigneur? Knowing that dueling is prohibited, I seized a bench and gave one of those brigands such a blow that I believe his shoulder is broken. Very well, said the cardinal. And you, Monsieur Aramis? Monseigneur, being very mild of disposition, and being likewise, of which Monseigneur perhaps is not aware, about to enter into orders, I endeavored to appease my comrades, when one of these wretches gave me a wound with a sword treacherously across my left arm. Then I admit my patience failed me. I drew my sword, and in turn, as he came back to charge, I fancied I felt that in throwing himself upon me, he let it pass through his body. I only know for a certainty that he fell, and it seemed to me that he was borne away with his two companions. The devil, gentlemen, said the cardinal. 3 men placed hors de combat in a cabaret squabble. You don't do your work by halves. And prayed, was this quarrel about? These fellows were drunk, said Athos, and knowing there was a lady who had arrived at the cabaret this evening, they wanted to force her door. Force her door, said the cardinal, and for what purpose? To do her violence, without doubt, said Athos. I have had the honor in informing your eminence that these men were drunk. And was this lady young and handsome? Asked the cardinal, with a certain degree of anxiety. We did not see her, monseigneur, said Athos. You did not see her? Ah, very well, replied the cardinal quickly. You did well to defend the honor of a woman, and as I am going to the Red Dovecot myself, I shall know if you have told me the truth. Monseigneur, said Athos haughtily, we are gentlemen, and to save our heads, we would not be guilty of a falsehood. Therefore, I do not doubt what you say, Monsieur Athos. I do not doubt it for a single instant. But, added he, to change the conversation, was this lady alone? The lady had a cavalier shut up with her, said Athos. But as, notwithstanding the noise, the cavalier did not show himself, it is to be presumed that he is a coward. Judge not rashly, says the gospel, replied the cardinal. Athos bowed. And now, gentlemen, that's well, continued the cardinal. I know what I wish to know. Follow me. The 3 musketeers passed behind his eminence, who again enveloped his face in a cloak and put his horse in motion, keeping from 8 to 10 paces in advance of his 4 companions. They soon arrived at the silent, solitary inn. No doubt the host knew what illustrious visitor was expected, and had consequently sent intruders out of the way. 10 paces from the door, the cardinal made a sign to his esquire and the 3 musketeers to halt. A saddled horse was fastened to the window shutter. The cardinal knocked 3 times, and in a peculiar manner. A man, enveloped in a cloak, came out immediately and exchanged some rapid words with the cardinal, after which he mounted his horse and set off in the direction of Surgés, which was likewise the way to Paris. Advance, gentlemen, said the cardinal. You have told me the truth, my gentlemen, said he, addressing the musketeers, and it will not be my fault if our encounter this evening be not advantageous to you. In the meantime, follow me. The cardinal alighted. The 3 musketeers did likewise. The cardinal threw the bridle of the horse to his esquire. The 3 musketeers fastened the horses to the shutters. The host stood at the door. For him, the cardinal was only an officer coming to visit a lady. Have you any chamber on the ground floor where these gentlemen can wait near a good fire? Said the cardinal. The host opened the door of a large room in which an old stove had just been replaced by a large and excellent chimney. "I have this," said he. "That will do," replied the cardinal. "Enter, gentlemen, and be kind enough to wait for me. I shall not be more than a half an hour." And while the three musketeers entered the ground floor room, the cardinal, without asking any further information, ascended the staircase like a man who has no need of asking his road pointed out to him. Chapter 44. The Utility of Stovepipes. It is evident, without suspecting it, and actuated solely by their chivalrous and adventurous character, our three friends had just rendered a service to someone the cardinal honored with his special protection. Now, who was that someone? That is the question the three musketeers put one to another. Then, seeing that none of their replies could throw any light on the subject, Porthos called the host and asked for dice. Porthos and Aramis placed themselves at the table and began to play. Athos walked about in a contemplative mood. While thinking and walking, Athos passed and repassed before the pipe of the stove, broken in halves, the other extremity passing into the chamber above, and every time he passed and repassed, he heard a murmur of words, which at length fixed his attention. Athos went close to it, and distinguished some words that appeared to merit so great an interest that he made a sign to his friends to be silent, remaining himself bent with his ear directed to the opening of the lower orifice. "Listen, milady," said the cardinal. "The affair is important. Sit down. Let us talk it over." Milady murmured Athos. "I listen to your eminence with great attention," replied a female voice, which made the musketeer start. "A small vessel with an English crew, whose captain is on my side, awaits you at the mouth of Charentais, at Fort La Ponte. He will set sail tomorrow morning. I must go thither tonight, instantly, that is to say, when you have received my instructions. 2 men, whom you will find at the door on the going out, will serve you as escort. You will allow me to leave first, then, after half an hour, you can go away in your turn." "Yes, monseigneur. Now, let us return to the mission with which you wish to charge me, and as I desire to continue merit the confidence of your eminence. Deign to unfold it to me in terms clear and precise, that I may not commit an error." There was an instant of profound silence between the two interlocutors. It was evident the cardinal was weighing beforehand the terms in which he was about to speak, and that Milady was collecting all her intellectual faculties to comprehend the things he was about to say, and engrave them in her memory when they should be spoken. Athos took advantage of this moment to tell his 2 companions to fasten the door inside and make them a sign to come and listen to him. The 2 musketeers, who loved their ease, brought a chair for each of themselves and one for Athos. All 3 men sat down with their heads together and their ears on alert. "You will go to London," continued the cardinal. "Arrived in London, you will seek Buckingham. I must beg your eminence to observe," said Milady, "that since the affair of the diamond studs, about which the duke always suspected me, his grace distrusts me." "Well, this time," said the cardinal, "it is not necessary to steal his confidence, but to present yourself frankly and loyally as a negotiator." "Frankly and loyally," repeated Milady, with an unspeakable expression of duplicity. "Yes, frankly and loyally," replied the cardinal in the same tone. "All this negotiation must be carried on openly. I will follow your eminence's instructions to the letter. I will only wait till you give them, You will go to Buckingham in my behalf, and you will tell him I am acquainted with all the preparations he has made, but that they give me no uneasiness, since at the first steps he takes I will ruin the queen. Will he believe that your eminence is in a position to accomplish the threat thus made? Yes, for I have the proofs. I must be able to present these proofs for his appreciation. Without a doubt, you will tell him I will publish the report of Beau Robert and the Marquise de Batru upon the interview which the Duke had at the residence of Madame the Constable with the Queen on the evening Madame and the Constable gave a masquerade. You will tell him, in order that he may not doubt, that he came there in the costume of the great Mongol, which the Chevalier de Guise has to have worn, and that he purchased this exchange for the sum of 3,000 pistoles. Well, monsieur? Monseigneur, really? All the details of this coming into and going out of the palace on the night when he introduced himself in the character of an Italian fortune teller, you will tell him, that he may not doubt the correctness of my information, that he had under his cloak a large white robe dotted with black tears, death's heads, and crossbones, for in case of surprise he was to pass for the phantom of the White Lady who, as the world knows, appears at the Louvre every time any great event is impending. Is that all, Monseigneur? Tell him also that I am acquainted with all the details of the adventure at Amiens, that I will have a little romance made of it, wittily turned, with a plan of the garden and portraits of the principal actors in the nocturnal romance. I will tell him that. Tell him further that I hold Montague in my power, that Montague is in the Bastille, that no letters were found upon him, it is true, but that torture may make him tell much of what he knows, and even of what he does not know. Exactly. Then add that his Grace has, in the precipitation with which he quit the Isle of Ré, forgotten and left behind him in his lodging a certain letter from Madame de Chevreuse, which singularly compromises the Queen, inasmuch as it proves not only that Her Majesty can love the enemies of the King, but that she can conspire with the enemies of France. You recollect perfectly all I have told you, do you not? Your Eminence will judge. The ball of Madame and Constable, the night at the Louvre, the evening at Amiens, the arrest of Montague, the letter of Madame de Chevreuse. That's it, said the cardinal. That's it. You have an excellent memory, milady. But, resumed she, to whom the cardinal addressed this flattering compliment, if in spite of all these reasons the Duke does not give way and continues to menace France, the Duke is in love to madness, or rather to folly, replied Richelieu with great bitterness. Like the ancient paladins, he has only undertaken this war to obtain a look from his lady love. If he becomes certain that this war will cost the honor and perhaps the liberty of the lady of his thoughts, as he says, I will answer for it, he will look twice. And yet, said Milady, with a persistence that proved she wished to see clearly to the end of the mission with which she was about to be charged, if he persists, said the cardinal, that is not probable. It is possible, said Milady. If he persists, his Eminence made a pause and resumed. If he persists, well, then I shall hope for one of those events which change the destinies of states. If your Eminence would quote to me some one of these events in history, said Milady, perhaps I should partake of your confidence as to the future. Well, here, for example, said Richelieu, when in 1610, for a cause similar to which moves the Duke, King Henry IV of glorious memory was about at the same time to invade Flanders and Italy in order to attack Austria on both sides. Well, did there not happen an event which saved Austria? Why should not the King of France have the same chance as the Emperor? Your Eminence means, I presume, the knife stab in the Rue des Fonneries? Precisely, said the cardinal. Does not your eminence fear the punishment inflicted upon Ravaillac may deter anyone who might entertain the idea of imitating him? There will be, in all times and in all countries, particularly if religious divisions exist in those countries, fanatics who ask nothing better than to become martyrs. Aye, and observe, it just occurs to me that the Puritans are furious against Buckingham, and their preachers designate him as the Antichrist. Well, said Milady. Well, continued the cardinal, in an indifferent tone, the only thing to be sought for at this moment is some woman, handsome, young, and clever, who has the cause of quarrel with the duke. The duke has had many affairs of gallantry, and if he has fostered his amours by promises of eternal constancy, he must likewise have sown the seeds of hatred by his eternal infidelities. No doubt, said Milady, coolly, such a woman may be found. Well, such a woman would place the knife of Jacques Clement or of Ravaillac in the hands of a fanatic, would save France. Yes, but she would then be the accomplice of the assassination. Were the accomplices of Ravaillac or Jacques Clement ever known? No, for perhaps they were too high placed for anyone to dare look for them where they were. The Palace of Justice would not be burned down for everybody, Monseigneur. You think, then, that the fire of the Palace of Justice was not caused by chance? Asked Richelieu, in the tone with which he would have put the question of no importance. I, Monseigneur, replied Milady, I think nothing. I quote a fact, that is all. Only I say that if I were named Madame de Montpensier or the Queen Mary de Medici, I should use less precautions than I take, being simply called Milady Cleric. That is, said Richelieu, what do you require then? I require an order which would ratify beforehand all that I should think proper to do for the greatest good of France. But in the first place, this woman I have described must be found who is desirous of avenging herself upon the Duke. She is found, said Milady. Then the miserable fanatic must be found who will serve as an instrument of God's justice. He will be found. Well, said the cardinal, then it will be time to claim the order which you must now require. Your eminence is right, replied Milady, and I have been wrong in seeing the mission with which you honor me anything but that which it really is, that is, to announce to his grace, on the part of your eminence, that you are acquainted with the different disguises by means of which he succeeded in approaching the queen during the fete given by Madame the Constable, that you have proofs of the interview granted at the Louvre by the queen to a certain Italian astrologer, who was no other than the Duke of Buckingham, that you have ordered a little romance of a satirical nature to be written upon the adventures of Amiens, with a plan of the gardens in which those adventures took place, the portraits of the actors who figured in them, that Montague is in the Bastille, and that the torture may make him say things he remembers, and even things he has forgotten, that you possess a certain letter from Madame de Chevreuse, found in his Grace's lodgings, which singularly compromises not only her who wrote it, but her in whose name it was written. Then, if he persists, notwithstanding all this, as that is, as I have said, the limit of my mission, I shall have nothing to do but to pray God to work a miracle for the salvation of France. That is it. Is it not, Monseigneur? And shall I have nothing else to do? That is it, replied the cardinal dryly. And now, said Milady, without appearing to remark the change of the Duke's tone toward her, now that I have received the instructions of your eminence as concerns your enemies, Monseigneur will permit me to say a few words to him of my own. Have you enemies, then? Asked Richelieu. Yes, Monseigneur, enemies against whom you owe me all your support, for I have made them by serving your eminence. Who are they? Replied the Duke. In the first place, There is a little intrigante named Bonchenu. She is in the prison of Mantes. That is to say, she was there, replied Milady. But the queen has obtained an order from the king by means of which she has been conveyed to a convent. To a convent, said the duke. Yes, to a convent. And to which? I don't know. The secret has been well kept. But I will know. And your eminence will tell me in what convent that woman is. I can see nothing inconvenient in that, said the cardinal. Well now, I have an enemy much more to be dreaded by me than this little Madame Bonchenu. Who is that? Her lover. What is his name? Oh, your eminence knows him well, cried Milady, carried away by her anger. He is the evil genius of both of us. It is he who, in an encounter with your eminence's guards, decided the victory in favor of the king's musketeers. It is he who gave 3 desperate wounds to De Wardes, your emissary, and who caused the affair of the diamond studs to fail. It is he, knowing it was I who had Madame Bonchenu carried off, has sworn my death. Ah, said the cardinal, I know of whom you speak. I mean that miserable D'Artagnan. He is a bold fellow, said the cardinal, and it is exactly because he is a bold fellow that he is the more to be feared. I must have, said the duke, a proof of his connection with Buckingham. A proof, cried Milady. I will have 10. Well then, it becomes the simplest thing in the world. Get me that proof, and I will send him to the Bastille. So far, good, Monseigneur. But afterwards? When once in the Bastille, there is no afterwards, said the cardinal in a low voice. Ah, perdu, continued he. If it were as easy for me to get rid of my enemy as it is easy to get rid of yours, and if it were against such people you require impunity, Monseigneur, replied Milady, a fair exchange, life for life, man for man. Give me one, I will give you the other. I don't know what you mean, nor do I even desire to know what you mean, replied the cardinal, but I wish to please you, and see nothing out of the way in giving you what you demand with respect to infamous a creature, the more so you tell me this D'Artagnan is a libertine, a duelist, a traitor. An infamous scoundrel, Monseigneur, a scoundrel. Give me paper, a quill, and some ink. Then, said the cardinal, hey, here they are. Here they are, Monseigneur. There was a moment of silence, which proved that the cardinal was employed in seeking the terms in which he should write the note, or else in writing it. Athos, who had not lost a word of the conversation, took his 2 companions by the hand and led them to the other end of the room. Well, said Porthos, what do you want? And why do you not listen to us to end the conversation? Hush, said Athos, speaking in a low voice. We have heard all it is necessary to hear. Besides, I don't prevent you from listening, but I must be gone. You must be gone, said Porthos, and if the cardinal asks for you, what answer can we make? You will not wait till he answers. You will speak first, and tell him that I am gone to the lookout, because certain expressions of our host have given me reason to think the road is not safe. I will say 2 words about it to the cardinal's esquire likewise. The rest concerns myself. Don't be uneasy about that. Be prudent, Athos, said Aramis. Be easy on that head, replied Athos. You know I am cool enough. Porthos and Aramis remained and resumed their places by the stovepipe. As to Athos, he went out without any mystery, took his horse, which was tied with his friends to the fastenings of the shutters, in 4 words convinced the attendant of the necessity of the vanguard for their return, carefully examined the priming of his pistols, drew his sword, and took, like a forlorn hope, the road to camp. And that, my friends, is the end of our reading tonight. Things are getting very dicey for our Musketeers and D'Artagnan. We're now seeing the revealed reality and plans of the Cardinal and Milady, and it concerns the Englishmen Buckingham. They say they are trying to save France, but are they? That is the question in my mind. Are they actually trying to save France? And if so, why is the king not involved in these dealings himself? And why is it that they use the queen as a pawn? It's very interesting. I hope you think so too. That is all for tonight, my friends. Love to you all. This has been Indiana Homes. Good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.